Hello, Manuel. You need to unmute.
Hello, nice to meet you.
And
nice
you.
to meet you, Manuel.
Gosh,
Hello.
I've met almost everyone. Anthony as well. Hello, Anthony.
Hi, finally.
How are you doing? But I haven't seen you since Oslo. When it was it? I can't even remember. Or Dubai or wherever it was.
It's been a while.
Exactly. How are you all? All good? It's a bloody small world when it comes to it, this place.
Okay, guys, now we are on air and our panel discussion is going to be moderated by Ekaterina. Ekaterina, your turn. Go ahead.
Hello, everyone. So today we are going to discuss future money about private banks, central banks, and blockchain technology currency. So let me introduce the speakers first. Here we have experts who have been really for a long time in the field. They are Patel. He is co-founder of Better Exchange and also chairman of Let's Beat Coronavirus. I'm really sorry, it's quite new organization. So Anthony Lay, with over 20 years experience in investment banking and also fund management of centralized finance. And also Manuel Batista, who is actually involved in Amethyst Asia Fund family office with also great experience in blockchain in different fields. And me, Ekaterina Volkova, co-founder of Rio DeFi, a blockchain technology company that basically is a bridging traditional and decentralized finance. So let's start. First of all, now we see that DeFi is changing the landscape of traditional finance, and lots of companies are looking at decentralized finance as something new and that something that they would like to implement in itself, but also private banks and central banks are also doing the same. So first of all, I would like to ask you, what do you think about DeFi? Could it displace traditional financial ecosystem like private banks, centralized platforms, as well as lending platforms and centralized exchanges? What is your opinion, Mru?
Okay, so thank you for Digital Week Online. My view is it's not new. So if you take it back to traditional days, people were doing peer-to-peer lending. If you wanted some money, you went to your father, mother, brother, sister, uncle, whoever, and you were doing peer-to-peer lending. Only it was not called DeFi, okay? So it was generally done through a piece of paper or no paper. So it was basically based on one key thing, which is trust, okay? Roll it forward now, and we are now into blockchain and internet. So my background is from Java and Sun Microsystems when it all happened. Even in those days when we were talking about Java and internet in the 90s, I remember having a argument with Steve Ballmer with his .NET saying, you know, it has to be anytime, any place, network is the computer and all these things, meaning give the power to the people and let them decide what to do, how to buy, and buy. In those days, we used to call it C2C, okay? Roll it forward, it's now blockchain and DeFi, okay? Decentralized finance is already happening. People are doing peer-to-peer lending only now with legal ways. So your question about will it replace private banking? My view is it's got to a point where trust has already been established, okay? So now people are used to buying things off the internet. People are used to shopping without even seeing who the retailer is or anything like that. So there's an element of trust being built, and there's lots of security and trusted authorities with legal legislation in place. So what DeFi, in my view, is going to do in the next 5 years is it won't displace private banking, but what will happen is the private banks and the clients more specifically will try to beat up the private banking organizations. And I'll give you a classic where, you know, Jamie Dimon, you know, dare I say it, 3 years ago when he crashed, or 2.5 years ago, where he crashed the market. I mean, as a big private banking organization, they were out there scared. So all the private banks are scared like anything. So he crashed it, but they were buying it and they were preparing their own platform in the background. Lo and behold, look at what they are doing now. They are doing exactly the same thing. So I don't think it will replace it, but it will work somehow in tandem. But there will come a time in not the distant future where the majority of the lion's share will be into new ways of doing DeFi-based solutions. I hope that gives you a good high
Thank
level.
you so much. I also would like to ask Anthony, because he's from traditional financial world and basically he spent there more than 20 years. So maybe he has another opinion, because I think he's also talking to these guys from private banks, and maybe he would tell that no, DeFi actually doesn't have that much trust, and it's not coming to action quite soon.
Oh, yes, from a traditional banking point of view, I think, yes, that we still need commercial banks, we still need private banks, and they're serving their purposes. And now that what I'm seeing in the DeFi space, there are more and more credible organizations that are coming up. They're still centralized, but slowly, eventually, they will become more decentralized. And now with Bitcoin is decentralized in the true sense of it, and people get they trust. They're now, even though they're not using Bitcoin as transaction, but many more people have come onto the cryptocurrency space, and they want to have an action in this, right? So it may not be Bitcoin in the future that will power this decentralized finance, but it could be some other cryptocurrencies. It could be something that we don't know yet. Maybe it's not been introduced to the market yet. But I think there are definitely, like what Muru was saying, that the people are getting more, they're trusting some of these organizations that have come up, and the trust has been built. And now that later on we will talk about central banks coming into this space, right? We will park that later on. But the fact that there are some central banks that are already doing some sort of pilot testing on all that, so it is adding some credibility in that. But private central banks are by nature centralized, so it doesn't really, in my view, it doesn't really come in a competition with DeFi. So DeFi is serving another segment of the market, and it may not be the institutions that are now still very reliant on commercial banks. So I I see it more of like these DeFi and centralized entities probably will work with each other, especially when the CBDC come into the market. It invariably it has to be some centralized party, like a central bank, guaranteeing what is the currency behind it. But there will be a second tier or third tier where this will be decentralized in a way that there will be intermediaries. It could be other financial institutions that's facilitating movement of this CBDC. So it may just converge with the DeFi of what we know, but I feel that it could be not as simple as what we see as a DeFi, because central banks in the world are also thinking along this line. They are trying to decentralize, but they won't come up with a one tier kind of currency. They won't come up with a cryptocurrency, right? So there will be a certain element of decentralization, but it wouldn't be the way we see it today.
So basically, I totally agree with you, Anthony, because especially regarding central banks, I don't think that they would go with decentralized finance so easily. And for sure, we will see quite shortly CBDC, how it's going to operate. Especially, we already see, as we know, it's starting in China, in Sweden. and it's ongoing in some other countries. But I also would like to ask Manuel. Manuel, what's your opinion about DeFi? Like, could it replace, for instance, crypto lending platforms, or like traditional banking investment platforms? Because as far as I know, you have EXW wallet. And inside this ecosystem, it's so global that maybe you have some special opinion about this.
Thank you. First of all, thank you, Digital Week Online, for inviting me. And I think as being allowed to speak after two experts in the blockchain space and in the traditional space, my opinion is that it will be definitely a mixture of both. So the DeFi world and everything what is coming. And as Mr. Patel said, and he was speaking about 5 years, what I think and my opinion is that unfortunately, as most of will agree, that the coronavirus and everything what happened was bad and is still bad for the world. But in terms of us speaking here about blockchain and finance, it accelerated for sure the development in terms of online banking and future of payments. And like this, I agree fully with Anthony when he said probably the players which will be in this field and they will be more operative, they are not yet in the market, and they are going to come up in the upcoming months or years, that they have been preparing for it. And I have my opinion on this, that in this time of coronavirus, they accelerated their work due to the fact of the lockdown and due to the fact that the developers, they could create even more work and finish that. So I think it will be a mixture between traditional and DeFi, but the adaptation of DeFi will be huge and will become more and more in the upcoming years. And also the fact of the possibility that is possible all over the world and be reachable with certain systems, also not only internet-based, but with different technologies, so that people also in South America, Africa, they will have online accounts and they wouldn't have traditional bank accounts by now, but for them it will be easy to have an online account and use a decentralized finance system on their phone, and being able to get back to the point of Mr. Patel, to do the trade and to have this trust in between people. So this is my opinion in terms of DeFi and traditional banking.
Yeah, and it's a good point, if I may, Katrina, what Manuel's saying. If you think about it, there's still about 2 billion plus people who are not banked or underbanked. And even the people who are banked, there is another billion in my view. In America itself, if you look at it, people are still getting paychecks the way they go to even a gas station to get their salaries. So people are, not banked properly. And this trust element, and I by the way, I'm an EXW wallet holder as well. So, and I have my own wallet as well, where we are looking at those places where it goes back to what I started with 30, 40 years ago, where people were lending money peer to peer. So with these wallets, people will be able to do it so easily because they'll know who the other person is. And if they know there's a smart contract behind it with some collateral, be it their crypto asset, which is marginalized or leveraged or something to loan someone money, why not? Cut the solicitors, cut the bloody banks. Sorry. I mean, even 3.5 years ago, with Tim Draper and people like that, we were having debates to say in 5 years, you will see 50% of at least the retail high street banks disappear. It's already happening. If you look at what Manuel was saying as well with the coronavirus, now people are absolutely confident that they need online banking. It's made them do online banking, so people have learned this skill. So it's not only just the millennials. So it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. The intelligent all-in-one smart wallets will rule, and people will do peer-to-peer loans.
I totally
I
agree.
also want to ask everyone, right? How about the cryptocurrency exchanges now? They are all centralized. And we've been talking about decentralized exchanges and all that. And there are a number of projects that are on the market, but do you see them gaining traction, rivaling some of the centralized exchanges?
Yeah, we've got a centralized exchange, and before that, as you know, I was with another exchange. So this exchange is partly centralized, but the main thing is about trust. People at the end of the day want to know who to point to. 99.9% of people don't realize that whether it's centralized or decentralized, all they care about is, can I do a buy, sell, put, call type of an trade?
Mhm.
All they care is, how secure is my money, and will I get the kind of trade we will get? It's us people in the blockchain industry who are screwing up, sorry to say, people's minds and making it so complicated with all this jargon and technology to solve a simple problem. I want to do an exchange in the most secure, trusted manner. End of story. When internet started, I used to say this in the 90s with Sun, that, why do you care how the IP and DNS hosting and all this happens? Who cares, right? Just solve people's problem, nice and simple. So yes, decentralized is good, but centralized good as well. That's my view. Make it easy for the people.
But do you think that new millennials, they would go more for decentralized exchanges because it would be something, let's say, modern, promoted or something? Because as we see, lots of people are going into blockchain space, not only because it's so unique, but because it's kind of a new fashion as well.
Yeah, I think the people who will go, even in the millennial space, not everybody is blockchain savvy, all right? So let's be honest. So the people who are blockchain savvy, yes, they might get anal about mine is centralized, mine is not centralized, mine's based on a stable coin, mine's on a utility coin, mine is this, mine is that. So, if you get down to reality, when money first started by bartering, and then gold or minerals, and then paper money got normalized, we are just going through that phase. That's all. So as long as they know that I'm giving you this $1, €1, £1, whatever it is valued at €1, $1, that's all they care about.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And as Anthony mentioned, also he started to talk about central banks and how they would react. So I would like to ask you, because you've been so much involved in all these government talks about fintech. I know your experience, it's quite broad. So what do you think about central banks? Would they go with the new digital currency like CBDC, or I don't know, synthetic CBDC? What do you think? Bro.
Who you asking?
I would like to ask all of you, but I would like to start Mru first, because he has been like, I remember our talks in Malta, blockchain summit,
Yes.
and yeah, he was so much involved in this government stuff and fintech. So I really curious to hear his ideas about that.
Yeah, well, if you remember, it made the Malta Times headline the next day.
True.
So basically, a lot of governments, in my view, are scared. They're scared for two reasons. They are going to lose control, okay? And they are also scared that now, the treasury, the central banking, and all this system is not something that is, in some places, I don't want to be someone to do all this rumor mongering, but how the treasury is handled and who's behind it and who controls the money and the printing of money, and whether it's up or down against other currencies. So all this is controlled via certain bodies. And what we are doing in the blockchain crypto space is taking it all out in a decentralized way. So what's happened in the last 5 years, banks have been watching from the sidelines, and I gave the example of Jamie, but you can look at most banks. They all say, oh, no, this will never take off, this will never take off, right the way through to some of the biggest economists. And you look at Nouriel Roubini, for example, and having spoken to him, even chatted today with him, he has a view that Bitcoin, shitcoin, it will never happen, it doesn't have any value, I ask everybody, in that case, why is a huge country like China doing a digital coin? Why is UK doing a digital coin through the central banking system? They both have two separate strategies in how they do it. You know, one is doing a platform based, one is doing slightly controlled. Okay, China has an agenda. I think personally, on record even, their agenda is they don't want to be dependent on the dollar. Okay, and they want their currency to say, why is 70% of the world's trade happening in dollar and not Chinese yuan? So this is their way to start stage one, because they can do all those arguments. It's no control. We are digital. We are instant. No cost. No SWIFT. No SEPA. None of this banking types of costs. So the yuan, the GBP, and all these people are doing it. So yes, it will happen. It's only which model works out best will come out over the next couple of years, my view.
And
Hello, Rico.
Anthony, what do you think? Because you are mostly like representing Asian side, so maybe you have any other ideas about that?
I mean, we go back to the China CBDC, right? So China now, of course, China has an agenda. One is to mainly to move a lot of the trades into renminbi. The internationalization of renminbi started in the early 2000, right? So now, basically, most of the ASEAN countries can clear renminbi. You've seen all those dim sum bonds and all that. Those are initiatives that PBOC have been coming up with different ways of trying to get more people to use renminbi offshore, right? And with the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, and even more attractive now, if, for example, because now they're coming up with the current model is a two-tier system, right? So it's not a direct from central bank to the man on the street. They do it deliberately because they're also aware that most of actually the biggest banks in China are state-owned, right? So they don't want to disintermediate the bank, so to speak. Basically, they don't want to compete with the commercial banks, right? Imagine if a man on the street can now place money savings deposit with a wallet, digital wallet, for example, place it with the central bank, right? Then a commercial bank or a retail bank will no longer be able to garner deposits, because most commercial banks rely on two, either interbank funding or wholesale funding. The third one, the most sticky one, is actually retail funding, right? So if you can't gain access to very sticky retail funding, which you pay very low interest, and then you lend them out, so banks will find that they don't have enough deposits, so they don't have enough funding. So they will have to go into the interbank to borrow money. So who do they borrow from? From the central bank. So the central bank will become lender of last resort to the commercial banks. So eventually they become, central bank become one bank and all the banks close shop. It can't be, right? So I think what China is trying to do is, while they are introducing this digital currency, they don't want to render the commercial banks obsolete in that sense. And at the same time, central banks don't really have the experience of dealing with men on the street in terms of retail or even companies, right? So they mainly have infrastructure working with financial institutions. They do interbank lending and all that, right? So they don't have the necessary probably experience or even infrastructure to handle that kind of volume as well. So instead of reinventing the wheel, so most likely they are going to use all the existing banks as a tier two, where they will distribute these currencies to, and all this CBDC will be 100% backed by reserves from the bank, right? So that eventually every CBDC that is issued will be a central bank guaranteed renminbi, for example, right? And if you look at it from a China perspective, if they're able to do that, pushing it through the commercial banks and Alipay or Tencent, right? So the adoption rate will be much faster, and because people are already familiar with Alipay, WeChat, and all that, right? So once that is gathering traction, the next phase, I believe they will move that into the trading partners along the BRI, the Belt and Road, Central Asia, for example. a lot of these countries will be selling commodities to China. And China, of course, will be selling some of their products to these Central Asian countries, eventually European countries. These countries will also have the incentive of not using dollar because it is definitely more expensive for them to exchange their currency into dollar instead of trading into respective commonly uh, um, maybe if it's a renminbi, because that is a two-way flow between these two countries, for example, right? So they are able to buy, sell with in that currency without having to convert their local currency into US dollars. Um, and of course, the last thing would be countries that are prone to sanctions by USA, right? So eventually, if they don't need to convert or do trades in US dollar, they can bypass SWIFT. So the way I see it, um, if this CBDC is not just China, right? Other countries are coming out with their own CBDC, and they are eventually not just within the country, they are able to trade with the trading partners in another agreed currency, digital, but non-US dollars. That will reduce the reliance on US dollar and also reduce the cost of Forex, for example. So it is definitely very attractive for various central banks to come up with some solutions so that they are able to, mainly is to reduce costs as well and make it more effective. But countries that are always in the limelight or kind of like always being highlighted as sanctioned countries and all that, they will find this very attractive to them. So I think it's not just China. There are other countries probably will want to really seriously taking a look at this
Well,
this new trend.
basically,
Anthony,
I would like to ask Manuel because
yeah.
he is like in Europe now, and I know that France just announced that they successfully tested just first steps of new digital euro. So I would like to ask your opinion, like how it will be. Will Italy use it, and will the whole Europe use it? Manuel,
You're on
we
mute.
don't hear you.
As I'm Italian, so let's see if Italy is going to use it. The factor will be a bit different in terms of technology and if the country is ready for such improvement or not. But hopefully, because in my opinion, there will be in the next decades there will be lots of retail CBDC is created, and there is always. I think you can speak about four major reasons why they would be. And as Anthony said, there's like this huge fact that lots of countries, they want to get away from the fact that it's all dollar based. And so to get this, and also to have as the different reason like cross-border payments, the digital identity, their own financial inclusion and financial stability and consumer protection in terms of this. And many countries strive for that so that they don't depend on the dollar, so that and with the possibility now of a CBDC, they will be able to literally be part of the game and get into this and not having that base. And as I like China very much because I was a former professional badminton athlete, so I was very often in China, and I agree with Anthony and also with something what we said before about DeFi. There is lots of systems existing already. There is Alipay, there is WeChat, and everything is like is in that direction. It will just be more. It will be more regulated. It will be more controlled. But the way to go, it will be that also governments, they need to get into this, and they will get into this, and not to be repetitive, but coronavirus showed it, and also coronavirus showed it. There is so many everywhere things that nobody would have expected 2 months ago, that you go to a store and you say we don't accept cash, but not because we want to be digital, but because it could have the virus. So but in terms of blockchain and in terms of a CBDC, it is necessary, and from different sources, there's more than 60 countries already working on this. And officially, we know all of what you mentioned. We know officially about China, Sweden, France, South Africa. And so I think this will be very, very interesting months ahead. And I say specifically months because I'm pretty sure that in the upcoming months there will be lots of new players in the game that are not government based, so that governments need to keep up with that, and to then get more into regulation and make the times harder for non-government bodies to be a financial matter. So this is I think where we are headed, and in my opinion, and I always think that it should never be like very drastic, like in one direction or in another direction. It is for sure going to be a mixture in the world, and I think this is also more healthy for everyone and for the world, that there will be the ones that stick to the old, and there will be the new, but there will be a dive into and a speed up. So a very speed up. This is I really emphasize on the fact that I think it's insane, positively insane, that how fast things are moving, how fast we are getting into this, and how fast now from all of the last 10 years, which took 10 years, I think now we speak about few months.
I totally agree here. The
Katerina,
things
could
are
I
really moving fast, so the time, I guess, is running. I'm really sorry.
just very quickly, I know we are going to talk about synthetic as well, but personally, I think there will be no one currency or one bank saying this is how it will happen. If you look at even some of the examples we talked about, being Alipay or whoever in China or in various other parts of the world, you don't need a central banking currency. You just tap with your QR code and away you go. Who cares what is being paid by? So I'm sure the EXW, and we are doing it as well, where you hold your wallet with multiple accounts, multiple currencies, multiple cryptos, and you do it on the fly to your preference. So you don't have to devalue currency. This is where I think governments are going wrong. Their currencies, especially coronavirus, and America being the craziest one, is printing money like it's going out of fashion. So somehow someone has got to pay for this. So the dollar will get affected in the long run. And God forbid there's a Cold War between China and America, and we start seeing threats of people calling back money and all this. What happens to the currency? So digital currency, in my view, with your wallet, you just tap and go, and you convert to whichever country you're in, whatever you're buying online. So central banks will have a place for large scale inter-world money, large scale oil, and big deals. Yes, but the day-to-day payments, I don't think they'll be able to control who chooses what currency.
Yeah, might be. I'm really sorry we have to finish. It was a really fantastic discussion. I was happy to see all of you, and thank you so much for your opinions. I guess we will see in the future how it will be in actual world. So thank you so much once more.
Thanks a lot, Ekaterina. Yes, and we are going forward with our next panel discussion. Rico is